Am I adulting good?
I just don't know what I'm doing. I can't breathe.
I feel so anxious.
This is what it's all about.
I just don't know what I'm doing. I can't breathe.
This is what life's all about. I just don't know what I'm doing. Oh, what's going on?
I don't understand.
Welcome to the Am I Adulting Good podcast, where we talk about all things self-help and the reality behind trying to adult to our best ability in this world. We're your hosts, Brianna, Kriss,
And I'm Caroline Savransky.
and we are both in community mental health, so we've seen some pretty interesting things.
Deciding to take on the journey of self-betterment is daunting and hard. Let's make the mistakes together and share what does and does not work. Because hey, are any of us doing anything right? And if we are, how would we even know?
We will cover a variety of topics like the old self-sabotage, toxic relationships, finding yourself after a breakup, or perfectionism. Special guests will be invited for most episodes to share their experiences and wisdom.
This podcast is aimed at anyone and everyone who needs a little bit of help getting their shit together and wants some company in doing so. We're in it for the laughs, but if we can learn something on the way, then that's good too.
Am I adulting good?
Hi all, welcome to another episode of Am I Adulting Good? And today will actually be our last episode of the season, which is sort of exciting, a few big changes to come, but we'll talk about that another time. But today we have joining us Alysha, who is a founder of Modern Love Counseling. So I'd like to say welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
So, Alysha, we always like to start off by asking our guests, what does adulting mean to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that question, and it's kind of funny, right? Because I think from my perspective, it's like a societal term that we, like there's all these expectations about what we should be as an adult, but really as a therapist and as a messy human being myself, I'm like, really adulting is just you're chronologically at a certain age, but emotionally you're still stunted at like this little kid, like we're all just trying to figure out life. So adulting to me is like a context that's societal based, and it really is a term that I think puts a lot more pressure on us than it does help us, because it's more like, oh, these are all of your responsibilities and you're also emotionally stunted, and there's really no support for that. So, yeah, I mean, I think adulting it's kind of a term that I think is supposed to signify this like great space in your life where you get your shit together.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's true, there's almost negative connotations that come with the term of adulting. And it's funny because when we're kids, we think about being an adult and the freedom and how cool it is. And then you're there and you're like, oh, wait, what? Why?
Yeah, I saw this meme where it was like, as a kid, my dream was to just eat junk food all day and sleep whenever I wanted and just do whatever I wanted. And it's like, that's depression.
Yeah. I didn't have a heart to tell my child that that's what depression is. But it's funny. It was also something when it's talking about, relating to your parents, is sometimes we need to see our own parents as just another person trying to adult with stunted emotional intelligence.
Totally. I mean, and I think that, a big part of my work as a therapist is to help people forgive their parents, because I think even when you become a parent or you're an adult, right, it's like chronologically, you still have so many expectations of your parents, and unfortunately, many of our parents aren't doing their own work anyway, too. So it's just like really disappointing. But yeah, I think we're just a bunch of people just trying to figure it out, it's just all of us. It's hard.
So then, speaking of that, who are you? What do you do? How did you get into relationship therapy and counseling? And yeah, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure. So I opened my practice, Modern Love Counseling, based in Denver 7 years ago. It's grown. We have a small practice now. There's 2 other women that work with me. We specialize in intimacy, relationships, sex therapy. I recently started doing like a couples therapy for business owners. So that's been really fun. because entrepreneurship is like such a big part of my life. And it's also, it's a very vulnerable relationship that you establish. So it's a really cool process to hold space for people to do that. And then, I don't know, I guess about 4 years ago, my husband and I also started the Modern Love Box, which was essentially, it was like it started off as a subscription box, but then it evolved into like, now it's just an online store where we have curated date boxes and then adult products. And then we have like a digital subscription every month of like communication activities to help you with emotional intimacy.
You'll be sending us out a sample box, yes? These adult products.
I wish I was told to Australia, but it's a little far away. So far away.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that's such a fascinating area to look into, especially of entrepreneurship and relationships, because as good old Biggie Small says, money and blood don't mix like two dicks. But I mean, he was...
You are the whitest person I know. Where did that come from?
My rebellious teenage years. No. We love that. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the whole finances is a huge thing that come into relationships. And I've always said you can tell a person's true sense of personhood or who they really are of how they act with money and around money and their relationship with money and others. That would be super hard to do, like just super interesting and a really, specialization.
What's so fascinating is that in couples therapy, for example, they'll talk about everything, right? Like I know very intimate details about their sex life, their childhoods, their trauma, but money is one thing that people don't talk about. It's just fascinating that there's so much wrapped into, when we're talking about adulting, right? It's a society expectation that you have your financial shit together. And if you don't, because you probably have never been taught, you hide it. And, like it's a big facade in a lot of our culture. Like, and I'm assuming Australia too, it's this big thing that, like money equates success and money equates status. And, it's unfortunate.
It's just a tool at the end of the day. Like imagine if somebody didn't have their cutlery drawer nice and neat, they wouldn't hide that from people. But essentially it's the same thing. It's just a tool that we use. And, I mean, you should definitely hide dirty dishes. Nobody likes to see that, but still.
Yeah, like with money, like it's just this feeling of like it's such like a complicated issue because when you're in a new relationship, you're like, is everything 50-50? But my partner earns a bit more. How do we sort out the rent? How do we do this? And you're with this person like 24/7 trying to keep your finances separate. So I can see how that's a very like touchy subject for couples.
Yeah.
Especially if someone earns more than another.
Oh, totally. That's what I mean is like when you talk about adulting, right? And like you're emotionally stunted at this immature age, right? But then you're supposed to be this successful, independent person. But then you're dating, it's like so many contradictions in that, right? It's like, well, be independent, be successful, but then don't need anybody, don't rely on anybody, don't show anyone your messy drawer. Like, there's so much to it, right? That's why I think adulting has such it's a heavy pressure,
So I guess we may as well go straight into then the main topic for today, which is, am I insecure in my relationship? And I mean, that kind of touches on it because if you're hiding things or if you're trying to show something that's not who you truly are, there would definitely be insecurity there. So when talking about insecurity, what is insecurity in a relationship and what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different parts. I think insecurity is, multifaceted. It can show up in the relationship, I think, because of circumstances. But I also think sometimes the most often insecurity is, it's probably an indication that you have some unfinished business. What I mean by that, it's probably some, residual effects of your trauma story that you've been carrying since you were a little person. And I think trauma doesn't have to be like a huge abusive situation. I mean, it could be just my parents didn't talk to me. My parents didn't ask me questions about myself, or my parents just bought me everything, but never really spent time with me. Like trauma could be anything, but at the end of the day, it's like sometimes we don't realize we start creating this story about who we are and about who other people are. And that's like so ingrained in our identity that, that brings on a lot of insecurity in our relationship when our partner can't fulfill that void that we've had since we were little,
Do you think insecurity is something that's always brought into a relationship, or do you think sometimes insecurity grows and manifests within the dynamics of a relationship?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think life is never all or nothing. I mean, I think there are circumstances where it shows up, where it evolves, where sometimes, maybe your insecurities about childhood have been, suppressed for so long, and then they start kind of peeling, all the layers, and you start getting really close to somebody. But sometimes, people like have experienced really healthy attachment in their, lives and have great relationships with their family and still find themselves a little insecure. And that could be external. I mean, that could be society, that could be, fidelity, that could be like you're dating someone with a personality disorder. That could be a lot of different factors,
What type of behaviors would somebody be able to pick up on to maybe understand that they might be insecure in a relationship? Or what can somebody look for in their partner to know that their partner isn't 100% comfortable or that they're insecure?
Yeah. I mean, I think that generally, right, it's like if you don't feel like you could be your full authentic self with someone, I'd say that's a huge indicator that you're pretty emotionally insecure. If you can't be your goofy side, you can't be your sexual side, you're vulnerable, you're financial, right? And sometimes I find that couples are really good in like 3 or 4 of those areas, and then one of them, they're just like, can't let you in that space. So that's an indicator. Obviously, if it's fidelity, if you're like checking on their phone, or you're like, you have the tendency to be like a looker and just, I also think if you feel like your partner is not being honest with you, or if there's insecurity there around what they do and say, if like you're constantly seeking reassurance, or you're constantly seeking, validation, that's probably another indicator as well. So, if you feel like on one really like deep level, you just cannot be seen by your partner for one reason or another, I'd say that's like an indicator of insecurity.
What kind of ramifications are there of being anxious or insecure in a relationship?
I think you ultimately can push somebody away, right? You can ultimately like make, small issues into huge issues to validate that trauma story, and be alone, right? So like if your biggest fear in life is to be alone, and then you get into a relationship but you're insecure and you have trust issues from past and you've never unpacked it, then the ramification could be I essentially am alone. I push that person away to the point where they leave me, or I push that person away to the point that I feel alone, even if we're in a partnership.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. I tell my clients, you're like a snake eating your own tail, So I think that's a huge ramification, but it can also be just that you behave in certain ways, like certain behaviors that ultimately, your partner, like causes you to be in a dysfunctional relationship, right? Where maybe they start feeling insecure, or maybe there's some codependency, or, but I think ultimately the ramifications could be just the loneliness factor, that you never let anyone in fully.
Yeah, wow. If you find that you're feeling insecure in the relationship, and I mean, it is definitely dependent on the person's partner as well, but how can somebody move through that? Is it something they should be doing on their own with a therapist? Is it something they should be bringing their partner into and doing with their partner? Or how can somebody go about, I guess, the steps of healing that insecurity?
Yeah. Well, obviously, if there was like infidelity or something, right? Like if there was a rupture in trust between the two of them, it's highly recommended to do some support with both of them, right? Because, obviously that rupture in trust probably like brought on a bunch of different feelings that I think both people need to learn how to repair together. But, again, not an all or nothing type of process. I think everyone's different. But generally speaking, I would say, therapy for the individual is really helpful. My licensure and my degree was around seeing more than one person, but when we do see one person, we're always looking at things through a systemic lens. So we're always taking into account for their culture, their community, their family, their relationships, whatever. So if you do go see a therapist, I am a little biased and I would recommend seeing somebody that has a systemic lens, because then they're not going to just say, oh, we're taking your opinion for face value and not challenging you to see how your stuff shows up in the relationship. So you're maybe not getting that accountability of like, you're just unpacking your trauma, but not really understanding how it's affecting your partnership, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more of what you mean by systematic therapy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the word that we use to describe like a system is any type of group that you're associated with. So like family would be a system, culture would be a system, religion would be a system. So, whereas traditional therapy, like Freudian, he didn't care about your systems. He wanted to know what unconscious behaviors and unconscious drives you had. So my degree just really specialized in understanding how does your community, your family, your relationships affect you, right? And
it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. They've done studies when they started branching out into this type of therapy, they were doing studies with schizophrenics, and they were seeing that schizophrenics were actually showing a lot of improvement when they were in a family therapy session, when the family was actually doing work together versus just the identified patient, i.e. the person with schizophrenia, getting help. So it's just a different way of how we're looking at, the problem, quote unquote, and the solution.
I never think anybody in a partnership is immune from improving on their communication or understanding of the other person or themselves. So yeah, 100%. I think, having blame in a relationship can be one of the hardest things to really work with. I know some people who will never take responsibility for anything that they do, and it's always somebody else's issue or someone else's problem for not fitting within their own framework. But it's just toxic then. It becomes very toxic.
Well, and that's indicative of a personality disorder for sure.
So on the flip side of that, what if somebody recognizes that their partner is anxious in their relationship? How could they approach that situation to try to, I guess, help their partner into potentially seeing it, but without undermining them or being patronizing? And do you have any tips or tricks as how to address that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the best thing you could do is address it, with an open heart. And what I mean by that is you also be vulnerable. And that's hard to do when you're probably feeling on the defense because your partner's projecting their insecurity onto you. But I think if you cannot take it personally for a moment and you can try your best to just be curious about it and ask questions about it, that could be helpful. Like really trying to understand, what is it that I do? What is it that I say? But then also maybe lead it back to childhood. And that's a tricky subject, right? Because sometimes it can come across patronizing. Sometimes it can look like, people are just putting you in a box and saying, oh, you have this issue because your dad left or whatever, right?
Whose dad doesn't leave?
Yeah.
I mean...
Unfortunately, mine does too. So yeah. But I also think too, I mean, I don't know how Australia views therapy, but my approach and practice is all about preventative counseling. So it could even be about acknowledging to your partner, I think maybe we should go to therapy together to get closer, to help each other understand each other better, and to help with these anxious or trust issues that you have, so that I can I can know what to do to show up for you differently,
before it gets to breaking point. Just
absolutely,
almost just like a healthy thing for anybody in any relationship to do. Just self-care, go to therapy. You mentioned that people that are quite secure, have a secure attachment style, could end up feeling a bit insecure if they're in a relationship with someone with a personality disorder. How do you help couples where one or two people have personality disorders? Do you think that they can have a healthy relationship?
Put them down.
To be honest with
What? What did you say? Put them down?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
that's not the right way to go. But I would say from my experience, more so than not, it's not going to work. More so than not, it's pretty challenging. I say that because most personality disorders are so entrenched in their victimization that they can't see other people's perspectives. And when you can't see other people's perspectives or take accountability, then you can't have a healthy relationship, right? Like then literally it's one person tending to that person the entire time. And so it depends though. I mean, personality disorders can be on, like a scale, if you will. And some people can just have characteristics or tendencies. And so if you catch it early, and if somebody is like, hey, my mom was a narcissist or my dad was a borderline, and I'm seeing these kind of characteristics show up in my relationship, then usually we can get some work done because that person has the ability to be aware and see themselves outside of those behaviors. But if it is like a full-blown borderline or full-blown narcissist, like most generally speaking, they don't think that they have anything that they have to work on. It is their partner's fault. It's the parent's fault. It's this fault. And they have valid reasons to feel hurt, but they just don't have the capacity to see that that's affecting their life, right? Like that's affecting their relationship. So it's really hard to acknowledge that.
Yeah. But I mean, even that trait in itself, I think, not just in personality disorders, but it really just takes anybody to acknowledge their part in the relationship to be able to make any changes and to make things work. But people with personality disorders, it's more rare, I guess, for that to happen then. But I think having that vulnerability to yourself to be able to recognize your own part makes all the difference in being able to work with a relationship and to fulfill it in ways. But yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, with people who are anxious, what do you see commonalities of where it does stem from? Are there patterns that are most, I guess, prevalent in somebody's life to cause anxiety in a relationship, aside from, I mean, fidelity, which is a huge one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and there are different theories on this. My theory that resonates with me and what I see in adult relationships is from an attachment lens. So, a lot of times they did studies on attachment in children, like, infants. Well, how, are you being coddled? Are you being tended to? You can have an insecure attachment if your mom is hovering you or if your parents are neglectful. But they sort of combined attachment theory with adult relationships like in the last 50 years. And so they're starting to realize that those attachment wounds kind of show up in adult relationships when there's this unconscious sort of trigger that your relationship's threatened, right? So that can happen when you're just in an argument about the dishwasher, right? It doesn't have to be anything like extreme. It could just be that panic, fight or flight. It's like literally attachment wound that gets activated of abandonment or, ridicule, rejection. So I think that, yeah, if you have, a history, I would say, of feeling like you're criticized all the time, or you feel neglected, or you were abused in any form, your body remembers that trauma, and your body, has a very beautiful, but sometimes too sensitive of a way to alert you that there is a risk or a threat of that happening again. And so that's usually when I help clients unpack that of like, okay, we're talking about the dishwasher here, but really what is it about? Right? Like it's about something deeper, and that, let's figure out a way to process that pain, to heal, so that you're not constantly projecting that onto your partner all the time,
So you're often seeing sort of benign arguments like who is packing or unpacking the dishwasher, and then you kind of get into the root of what is the real issue here.
Absolutely. I'm a more process versus content oriented therapist. Like it's really hard for me to talk about he said, she said, this happened this time. Like I just see pain, right? So I just want to call it the pain. Like I just want to call it the fact that like this is the way you're trying to communicate that you feel unsafe, right? That you feel insecure, that you feel anxious, that you feel sad. So let's talk about that. And usually that's when people can feel validated that like, yeah, I do feel hurt. I do feel pain. I am being petty about the dishwasher, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's big. How much does different love languages take part in, I guess, these little pettiness? Because often I think like, I can ask you, what are the different love languages? And I mean, often from my understanding, they stem from childhood, but then we seek them in adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of validity to it. I think they can change though throughout your life and circumstances. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times the differences in love languages will be what brings clients into therapy. You know, either they know about love languages and they're like, oh, we've researched this, we read the book, we did the test, and we know we have conflicting love languages and we want to know what to do about it. Or other times it's like a big issue that they just cannot repair because, you know, one partner feels unseen, that, you know, they never take them on date night, where the other one feels like they never tell them that they're beautiful. So it's like, I think that that's a big thing to spark some insecurity for sure.
Yeah, I know my insecurities rise when I don't have all 5 love languages thrown at me every day. No.
Girl. Yeah, no, that works.
What are some resources out there that you'd recommend for people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think the love language book is a good one. There's a book called Hold Me Tight that is created by, or it's written by the creator of this attachment theory that's fairly new in, you know, the therapy world. She's the one that kind of brings the attachment into adulthood. It's really fascinating. And I think it's helpful because it kind of helps, she throws out different case studies or like different, you know, couples and their experiences. So it helps you objectively look at this dance versus your own experience. So I really like that book. But it, you know, again, I just don't feel like there's a resource for just one person out there that works. I think like that it's like, so it's just, there's so many different levels. But I'm obviously an advocate for therapy. You know,
therapy's the best.
Yeah, I mean, it changed my life. That's why I became one. I just think it's so helpful to have a safe space and to feel like you can, you know, communicate about all the things that are in there and just process it and unpack it and like explore. So that's obviously a resource. Some people like coaching more than therapy. And if that's more your cup of tea, I'd say that's a good resource as well.
What's the difference between coaching and therapy?
It's kind of confusing actually, but I would say in a nutshell, therapy, you actually have like state, you know, like you have state legalities that you have to basically check, right? So you have to have a degree, you have to like have a license, you have to go through all these hoops. And the training is a lot of depth therapy. It's a lot of like helping people with their psyche, diagnosis, things like that. Whereas coaching, anyone can be a coach in the States. You don't have to have a degree. It could just be, you know, that you were successful in business. So you want to coach people on how to be successful in business. So you have more of like an action oriented, like solution based plan. I would say my style is a mixture of the two, but because I feel like I have the training, it, you know, it just helps a lot, I think, with understanding people's psyche better. But some coaches have training. I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, but I know it's just a little bit more solution focused than it is like depth focused, right?
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
The same in Australia. You don't have to have any particular qualifications for coaching. Just be a super go-getter person that can share your experiences.
And complete a 6-week online course.
You know, as someone with a psychology degree, I have my opinions on coaching, but yeah, anyway.
I'm sure.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm based in Denver, Colorado. And, you know, the Modern Love Box is just, do you want me just to give you the website or?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just www.modernlovebox.com. My practice is modernlovecounseling.com. And that's pretty much, you know, where you can find me. I have a really interesting blog that I've been dabbling into for 7 years on the Modern Love Counseling site. So that's been interesting and fun to just write about. So even if you can't seek my services, it's nice to just be able to, you know, pop on and read some of the stuff and leave comments. And there's even a forum in there where you can ask me questions. I can't get to all of them, but some questions I try to answer personally about certain relationship topics. So that's where you can.
And do you have an Instagram, Facebook, social media?
Not really, to be honest with you. Yeah. I
So
kind
nice.
of, yeah, I understand that it's necessary for marketing purposes, but I actually kind of loathe social media. Not bagging anybody that's on it, but it's really not been for me. So eventually maybe I'll hire somebody to take it over so I don't have to deal with it.
Yes, you don't have to do the dirty work.
Yeah, but I do have them, but I just don't really utilize them, unfortunately.
With your Modern Love Box, that can be a resource that anyone around the world can have access to and do in their own homes, right?
Well, the digital communication activity could be, but as far as that tangible products, we only ship out to the US. So unfortunately, that's not for everybody, but yeah, the digital communication activity gets downloaded all over the world. And those are just questions, you know, why I established it was because I was telling clients, you know, go on date nights, like have more quality time and have more sex, right? And like clients just didn't know how to really utilize that in a more intimate way. So they were going to the same place, having the same conversation, having sex the same way. And so I realized like there were a lack of resources that I could provide them other than books. So that's where the whole creation came from, is to like give people the actual tangible, you know, things that like can inspire you to have more depth in your relationship or more vulnerability, whether that be sexual or emotional. So yeah, it's a really cool, yeah, it's really fun.
Such a good idea. I wish we had that in Australia.
Yeah, one day expand. And then we always finish off by asking our guests about the Holy Trinity, which is if you can please share with us a gratitude you have, a brag, and a desire.
Awesome. Yeah. So my gratitude is absolutely, I mean, the first thing that came to me is my family. You know, my daughter and my husband are like my rocks. So I love them very much and very grateful for them. A brag is my business. I mean, I'm very proud of what I've built and that I help people every day. It's like a very beautiful gift that I feel I have, and I love sharing it, and I love supporting people in that way. And what was the last one? A desire. Gosh, again, the first thing that came to me just now is like a desire to have better gun control. That's a whole other thing, but it's like the states, man, is just it's alarming. That would be the desire.
Yeah.
Whole other conversation, but that's the first thing I thought. It was like, yeah, to not be afraid to like go out to eat. I mean, that would be great.
Yeah, wow, so powerful, so true.
I know, but yeah, no, honestly, I appreciate this time so much with both of you, and I appreciate the consideration and all of the things. So I hope this is helpful.
Thank you so much for coming on, Alysha.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, and honestly could speak to you about so many topics, and so thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
Yeah, thank you.
That was such a wonderful session with Alysha, and she is so knowledgeable and brings up so many good points around what can cause anxiety in a relationship and how to identify it and what to do next, because it's so normal and natural for people to have anxiety in a relationship. And I mean, often it's only when you actually get into one do these things come up and do you actually get triggered. So that was really nice.
Especially the older you get, I find when you're younger and you get into a relationship, there's not that much quote unquote baggage, but the older you get, the more you've had your heart broken, the more you've been hurt, disappointed, especially if you're getting into a relationship in your late 20s, 30s, there's all this stuff to unpack, not only from childhood, but from all the previous relationships. And then you've chosen this person and then they have to deal with all the heartbreak and baggage that you've come and brought. So I think Alysha's point of that sort of preemptive going to therapy, just as like a precautionary self-care measure, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I mean, therapy is for everyone. Therapy is the best. The number one piece of advice, I think, from every single one of our episodes has been go to therapy. We all need someone to talk to. We all need tips and tricks and to learn how to communicate better. Yeah.
Well, I'm really sad that was my last interview with you, Brianna.
I know. This, as we mentioned earlier, just in the intro, this is going to be our last episode for the season. And it's going to be sad because Caroline will be leaving us for now.
Yeah, I'm going to be studying at uni and unfortunately taken on a second job. So I'm not much help to Brianna at this point. So she's going to find someone that's that can put in a bit more grunt and brunt. So I am passing on the torch to whoever the lucky person is that'll get to work with Brianna and do this podcast. And I bow out to her incredible presence. But it's been amazing working with you.
It's been so fun. It's going to be a sad end to the chapter, and we'll see what happens as we move forward. But I'd love to have you on sporadically as guest speakers and see where you're up to.
Yeah, won't hear the end of me. Thanks guys for listening to us, and whoever will come on next will be amazing because Brianna is a fucking gem.
No, it won't be the same without you.
Love you.
But love you. See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Am I Adulting Good podcast. We hope you guys are getting out of it as much as we are and are learning a trick or two about how to adult. Please give us a review and a 5-star rating, like our podcast, and follow our channel on whichever streaming app you're using. It really helps us reach more people and build our community.
Hit us up on Instagram at Am I Adulting Good. Also, remember to send us your Holy Trinity and share your stories with us at amiadultinggood@gmail.com. Each week, we'll share one of our adulters' emails, and that could be you. Seriously, we love hearing from you. Keep doing your thing, adulters. We love you. We love you.
Am I adulting good?